are several men of towering stature who in our time have changed the face of this old planet. Among them, Juan Trippe, pioneer of over-ocean flying and dean of airline executives, an empire builder in the classical sense. His ambition, to build an empire in the air, one linking all the countries of the world, large, small, rich, and poor. Juan Trippe is the molder of the first great international airline. Juan Trippe's vision was to build an American flag international air service linking all lands and uniting the peoples of the world through trade and tourism. He took Pan American World Airways from last to first among the world's airlines. Under his leadership, Pan Am pioneered overseas air transport for the United States. Pan Am was the first airline to fly the Pacific, first to fly the Atlantic, and first around the world. He sponsored the development of generations of new and advanced transports, from the early flying boats to today's 747s. The story of Juan Trippe begins as a young night bomber pilot in the Navy in World War I. After the war, he returns to his beloved Yale University. And soon after graduation, 3 years later, he forms Long Island Airways. It's small, only 7 World War I planes, but it's important because it became a test vehicle to develop the economics of commercial flying, to study the scheduled transport of mail, cargo, and also passengers. In 1925, with a board of directors, mostly old friends and World War I pilots, he establishes and becomes managing director of Colonial Air Transport, to operate between New York and Boston. Under his direction, Colonial becomes the first successful domestic airline venture to operate at a profit. 2 years later, in 1927, Juan Trippe foresees an even greater challenge in international aviation, and he becomes president of Pan American Airways and makes the first overseas flight under the American flag on October 27, 1927, between Key West and Havana. Pan Am begins with $300,000 in assets and a 90-mile route. Under Juan Trippe's leadership, as part of the American private enterprise system, but competing on all world trade routes with government-owned foreign flag airlines, Pan Am is to grow in assets to $1 billion, with a route system of 80,000 miles to 85 lands on all 6 continents. Soon, Pan Am is operating daily passenger and mail service with its multi-engine Fokkers. Trippe uses the Caribbean as a testing laboratory as Pan Am perfects two-way radio, navigational aids, life-saving equipment, multiple flight crews, weather reporting services, even cabin attendants serving hot meals aloft. All firsts in aviation. As Trippe builds an international airways system, he sees the need to carry more passengers greater distances at higher speeds. Sikorsky builds a 40-passenger flying boat to his specifications. It is christened the American Clipper, christened by Mrs. Herbert Hoover. Charles Lindbergh captains it on its maiden flight to Panama in 1931. Now, Trippe's next challenge, over-ocean air service to Europe and the Orient for mail, passengers, and cargo. In 1934, Trippe uses tiny ocean atolls, Midway and Wake, as well as Honolulu, Guam, and the Philippines, as stepping stones to build an airway across the Pacific. 1935, Pan Am inaugurates airmail service to the Philippines. In 1936, the China Clipper carries the first passengers over a major ocean in scheduled air service between San Francisco, Hong Kong, and China.
China Clipper, are you ready?
Pan American Airways China Clipper, Captain Music. Standing by for orders, sir.
Stand by, all stations. Captain Music, you have your sailing orders. Cast off and depart for Manila.
In 1939, with a fleet of giant long-range Boeing flying boats, Pan Am opens the first scheduled air service over the Atlantic for passengers, mail, and cargo. But the clouds of war are gathering in both the Atlantic and Pacific. At the moment America enters the war, Trippe and his 20,000 Pan Am employees join in the defense of the nation. Pan Am airfields overseas become staging bases. Logistic air services over both oceans with long-range Boeings are established to support the fighting forces. As peace comes, Juan Trippe continues to build Pan Am as the premier international line. It was Juan Trippe who in 1944, 25 years ago, envisioned international travel for the average man. He said, "The true objective is to bring to the life of the average man those things which were once the privilege of only the fortunate few." The average man's holiday has in the past been the prisoner of two grim keepers, money and time. His enjoyment of the world has been circumscribed by the high walls of his economic jail. We can level these prison walls only by bringing travel costs way, way down and by shortening travel time. In 1945, with encouragement from the President of the United States, he takes Pan Am into the international hotel business. He establishes Intercontinental Hotels Corporation, which now has 49 great hotels in operation in 39 lands and 21 hotels in construction in 12 additional lands. Pan Am initiates the first round-the-world air service in 1947. In 1955, he places a huge order for commercial jets with Boeing and Douglas, an event that is to have tremendous impact on the course of history. Enlist Pan Am in the space program by putting the airline's know-how at the service of the government at Cape Kennedy and the downrange missile tracking stations in the Caribbean, the South Atlantic, Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian Ocean. He enters the business jet field with the Fanjet Falcon. He pioneers advanced concepts of intracity travel with helicopter service. He sees the Pan Am building, the world's largest office building, now largely owned by Pan Am, rise in Manhattan as Pan Am's home office, dominating a crossing of famous streets in a great city. In 1966, he signs a $600 million contract for 25 Boeing 747 Superjets, the largest order in commercial aviation history. In 1968, Juan Trippe retires, but continues to serve as honorary chairman of Pan Am. Today, he is in his 34th year as a member of the Business Council, having served for many years on its executive committee and for 2 as vice chairman. For services to the peoples and nations of the world during more than 4 decades, Juan Trippe has received 26 decorations from foreign nations, more than any other private American citizen so far as I know. From the President of the United States, he received the Medal of Merit, the highest civilian award. He holds honorary degrees from many universities, including Yale, his alma mater, which in 1937 conferred on him an honorary degree. And he is the recipient of all 10 major aviation awards, including the Wright Brothers Memorial Trophy, the Collier Trophy, and the Harmon Trophy. For contributions in the fields of business, trade, education, sport, and social service, he also holds 29 other awards, including the Captain Robert Dollar Award of the National Foreign Trade Council, the Gold Medal Award of the National Institute of Social Sciences, the Hubbard Medal from the National Geographic Society, and the coveted Gold Medal of the National Football Foundation and Hall of Fame. He is a director and member of the Finance Committee of Metropolitan Life. He was for 30 years a director and member of the Executive Committee of Chrysler Corporation. He served for 20 years as an alumnus and life trustee at Yale. He was on the board of visitors of the Harvard Business School and the Johns Hopkins University. He is a trustee of the Carnegie Institution of Washington, the National Geographic Society, the University of Liberia, the Institute of International Education, and the Eisenhower Exchange Fellowship. Juan Trippe's legacy to the nation is Pan Am, the world's leading international airline. But his history is more than the creation of an airline and a world network of airways. It adds up to more than 4 decades of service in the American free enterprise tradition. 4 decades which have enriched the lives of the peoples of the world.